Ryan Carter slammed his laptop shut at 11:47 p.m., grabbed his keys, and ran out the door, leaving his daughter's half-finished bedtime story open on the kitchen table. His boss was trapped. A man she barely knew was lecturing her about blockchain, while she sat frozen behind a wine glass she hadn't touched in 40 minutes. Ryan didn't think twice. He just moved. But here's what he didn't know, what nobody told him. Lauren Pierce, the most powerful woman he'd ever worked for, had been quietly, achingly in love with him for 3 years. Drop your city below. I want to see how far this story travels. Subscribe and come with me. This one's going to stay with you. The phone rang at 11:43 p.m. on a Thursday, and Ryan Carter almost didn't answer it. He was standing in the doorway of his 7-year-old daughter Emma's bedroom, watching her chest rise and fall in the soft blue glow of her nightlight, the same little seahorse lamp they'd had since she was born. He'd just finished reading her Charlotte's Web, the part where Wilbur doesn't understand why Charlotte is suddenly so tired, and Emma had fallen asleep mid-sentence with her fingers curled around the corner of the book. Ryan had eased it out of her grip, tucked the blanket under her chin, and told himself that tonight he was going to go to bed before midnight for once. Then his phone buzzed on the hallway dresser. He glanced at the screen. Lauren Pierce, CEO. He stared at it for 2 full seconds. At 11:43 at night, Lauren Pierce didn't call for small things. He stepped out of Emma's doorway and answered. Ryan. Her voice was low, controlled. The way Lauren always sounded when she was trying very hard not to sound like something was wrong. Yeah, he said, already walking toward the kitchen. What happened? A beat of silence. Then, I need you to do something for me, and I need you to not make it weird. Ryan opened the refrigerator out of habit, stared at nothing inside it, and closed it again. Okay. I'm at Marchetti's. She said the name of the restaurant like it was a crime scene. On 5th. I've been here for an hour and 40 minutes with a man named Gerald, who has explained to me in detail why Ethereum is superior to Bitcoin, why I should move 30% of my personal portfolio into something called a liquidity pool, and why women in tech don't fully grasp decentralized finance yet. Ryan closed his eyes. Lauren. I need you to call my phone in exactly 4 minutes, she said. Say it's an emergency, work emergency, something that can't wait. He stood very still for a moment. Then, where did you meet this guy? Sarah set it up. A pause. I'm going to fire Sarah. You're not going to fire Sarah. Ryan, 4 minutes, please. He could hear something underneath her voice. Not panic, Lauren didn't panic, but something that sounded almost like embarrassment, which was rarer. Lauren Pierce ran quarterly board meetings in 4-inch heels and didn't break a sweat. Whatever this Gerald had done in an hour and 40 minutes, it had gotten under her skin in a way that Ryan found quietly, unexpectedly irritating. 4 minutes, he said. But Lauren, why don't you just leave? Because Gerald drove. Ryan put his hand over his mouth. He drove you there. He offered. I thought it was polite. I did not anticipate the Ethereum portion of the evening. Okay. Ryan was already moving. He grabbed his jacket off the back of the kitchen chair, checked Emma's room one more time, still sleeping, still perfect, and texted his neighbor, Mrs. Patton, emergency work call. Emma's asleep. Can you listen for her 30 minutes, Max? Mrs. Patton was 72, kept her phone on loud, and had a key. She texted back in under a minute. Go. I've got her. Ryan was out the door in under 3. He called Lauren at exactly the 4-minute mark, pulling onto 5th Street. Oh, hold on, he heard her say, voice shifting into the professional register. This is my assistant. He never calls this late unless... A pause, theatrical. Yes, Ryan, what is it? There's a situation, Ryan said, playing along without missing a beat. They'd done this before, not this exactly, but the dance of it, covering for each other, filling in the gaps. 3 years of working together builds a particular kind of rhythm. The Singapore contract. The Lim Group is requesting an emergency call, and they want you on it. Tonight. Tonight. Lauren's voice carried the right amount of reluctance. What time? They're 12 hours ahead. It's already their morning. God. She exhaled slowly. Gerald, I'm so sorry. This is exactly what I was afraid of when I said my schedule was. A murmur from the other side of the table. Then crisply, Ryan, where are you? Pulling up outside. Perfect. I'll be right out. She hung up. Ryan parked along the curb, left the engine running, and watched the glass door of Marchetti's. She came out 90 seconds later. Lauren Pierce was not a woman who arrived, she appeared. Even now, at nearly midnight, in a dark green dress and heels that had no business being on a sidewalk at this hour, she walked like she owned every inch of the ground she covered. Ryan had seen her do it in boardrooms in airport terminals, in hospital waiting rooms, the night her father had a heart scare 2 years ago. It was not arrogance. It was something deeper, a kind of certainty that she had learned he suspected the hard way. She pulled open the passenger door and got in. For a moment, neither of them said anything. Then Ryan said, liquidity pools. Lauren turned to look at him. Her expression was flat exhausted, and somewhere behind that faintly mortified. If you say another word about Gerald... I'm not saying anything about Gerald. Good. How old is Gerald? Ryan. Just curious. Drive. But the corner of her mouth twitched, just slightly. He drove. They were 3 blocks from Marchetti's before Lauren let out a long breath and leaned her head back against the headrest. Ryan kept his eyes on the road and let her have the silence. That was one of the things he'd learned early. Lauren Pierce processed things quietly, and she didn't need you to fill the space. Thank you, she said finally. Part of the job. She turned her head to look at him. Is rescue me from a man named Gerald who doesn't think women understand crypto listed anywhere in your job description? Under other duties as assigned. She laughed. Not the polished laugh she used in meetings, the real one, short and a little surprised, like it escaped before she could stop it. Ryan had heard it maybe a dozen times in 3 years. He'd never quite gotten used to how different it made her look. I'm sorry I called so late, she said. Was Emma asleep? Just went down. You were doing bedtime. It's fine. Ryan. Her voice shifted. I'm sorry. I should have just, I don't know, told him I had a headache and called a car. Why didn't you? A long pause. She looked out the passenger window at the streetlights sliding past. I don't know. I kept thinking it would get better. That maybe the next thing he said would be interesting. She paused. It did not get better. No. I gathered. He told me that women in tech don't fully grasp decentralized finance. She said it very evenly. Ryan looked at her sideways. You've taken your company from 40 employees to 400 in 3 years. I know. You just closed a $47 million partnership with the Lim Group. Ryan, you were named to the Forbes list twice. I am aware of my own accomplishments, she said, and there was a smile in her voice, now reluctant and warm. I didn't want to fight with a stranger over dinner, that's all. He nodded. They drove for another minute in silence. How long has it been since you went on a date? He asked. He didn't know why he asked it. It just came out. Lauren was quiet for a moment. 18 months, she said. Maybe 19. The last one was a conference in Denver. It was fine. Nothing came of it. She looked at him. You? Ryan kept his eyes forward. Little longer than that. Since Emma's mom? Since before that, honestly. He said it without bitterness. Just the plain truth of it. Diane and I were already done by the time Emma came. We just neither of us was willing to say it out loud until we had to. Lauren watched him. Do you miss it being with someone? It was the kind of question she never asked him. In 3 years, their conversations had been closer than most bosses and assistants, he knew that. But there were lines they didn't cross. Personal lines, professional lines. The invisible map they'd both agreed to follow without ever discussing it. "Sometimes," he said. "Mostly I'm just tired. By the end of the day, I don't have a lot left to give." "That's honest." "You asked." She nodded slowly. "I did." She looked back out the window. "I think that's why I keep saying yes to these things Sarah sets up. Because I keep thinking if I just show up eventually, one of them won't feel like work. And so far, all of them have felt like work." A pause. "Except tonight didn't feel like work exactly. Tonight felt like a seminar I didn't register for." Ryan laughed. Lauren looked at him and laughed again too, and for a moment the car felt lighter than it had any right to feel at midnight on a Thursday. He pulled up outside her building on Meridian and put the car in park. Lauren didn't move right away. She sat with her hands in her lap, looking forward at the glass entrance of her lobby. Ryan watched her in his peripheral vision. He'd driven her home before from late nights at the office, from events that ran long, from a company retreat 2 years ago, where she'd had exactly 2 glasses of wine and declared with complete sobriety that the team-building exercises were a form of corporate cruelty. He'd driven her home plenty of times. She always said thank you, got out, went in. Tonight she sat. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Sure." She turned to face him. In the low light of the parking structure, she looked different than she did at the office. Less armored. Not vulnerable. Lauren Pierce was never vulnerable exactly, but something softer than her usual edges. Something that made Ryan suddenly inexplicably aware of how small the car felt. "Do you ever think about—" She stopped herself, pressed her lips together, looked back at the lobby. "About what?" he said. She shook her head slightly. "Nothing. Never mind." "Lauren. It's late. You should get back to Emma. She's fine. Mrs. Patton is next door." He paused. "What were you going to say?" A long moment. The lobby lights cast a pale gold stripe across the car. Somewhere above them, a city bus rumbled past on the street. "Do you ever think," Lauren said carefully, "that things might have been different? If the circumstances were different?" Ryan's hands were still on the steering wheel. He didn't move them. "What circumstances?" he said. "You know what circumstances." She looked at him directly now, and there was something in her face that he had never seen before, or maybe he had. Maybe he'd seen it and looked away from it the way you look away from something too bright. "If you didn't work for me, if the company wasn't between us." The heater clicked softly. Outside, a cab rolled through a yellow light. Ryan looked at the lobby. He looked at his hands. He looked at Lauren. "That's a question I've trained myself not to ask," he said, "because the answer doesn't change anything." She nodded once slowly, like he'd confirmed something she already knew. "Right." She reached for the door handle. "That's the smart answer." "Lauren." "Good night, Ryan." She got out and her heels clicked twice on the pavement before she stopped. She turned back just for a second and looked at him through the window. The expression on her face was something that would stay with him all the way back home through the quiet streets and past Mrs. Patton's darkened doorway and into his kitchen, where the sink faucet dripped and Emma's book was still open on the table. It was an expression that looked almost exactly like someone who had been waiting a very long time to say something, and who had just decided once again not to say it. He checked on Emma when he got home. She'd turned over onto her side, the blanket half off one arm around the stuffed elephant she'd had since she was 3, and still called Gerald, which given the evening made Ryan stand in the doorway for a moment longer than usual. He fixed her blanket. She stirred, muttered something that sounded like, "but the leaves," and went still again. Ryan sat down on the edge of the armchair in the corner of her room, the chair he'd bought second-hand when they moved into this apartment, the one that was too big for the space, but that he couldn't bring himself to get rid of because it was the chair where he'd held her night after night when she was newborn and screaming, and he had absolutely no idea what he was doing. He sat in it now and thought about Lauren Pierce's face. Do you ever think about if the circumstances were different? He'd answered correctly. He knew he had. He was her assistant. She was his CEO. The power difference alone made the whole thing a minefield, and Ryan had never been the kind of man who pretended minefields didn't exist. He had Emma to think about. He had health insurance and a salary that let him keep this apartment and send Emma to the school where her best friend Molly was and buy her the books she tore through every week and a half. He was not a man who could afford to make a mistake like that. He knew all of that. He'd known it for longer than tonight. But there was something he hadn't known. Something he was only now starting to reckon with sitting in the dark, in the oversized armchair, while his daughter dreamed about leaves. He hadn't known until tonight that Lauren Pierce had been waiting a very long time to say something. And the fact that she hadn't said it, that she'd stopped herself, pulled back, reached for the door, told him more than any words would have. Because Lauren Pierce didn't stop herself from things she didn't care about. Lauren Pierce was the woman who flew to Seoul on 12 hours' notice to save a partnership, who called contractors at 6 a.m. on a Saturday, who had once told a venture capitalist to his face, and in front of 7 other people, that his projections were mathematically hopeful. Lauren Pierce only held back when the stakes were high enough to be worth protecting. Ryan sat with that thought for a long time. Outside, the city settled into its late-night quiet. The refrigerator hummed. Emma breathed. The seahorse nightlight turned slowly, throwing pale shapes across the ceiling. He didn't sleep for a long time. Comments flooding in from Dallas, Chicago, Denver, Seattle. Drop your city below, and let me know where you're watching from. If this story is hitting you somewhere you didn't expect, you're not alone. Subscribe, hit the bell, and stay with me. Because the part that comes next, Ryan has no idea what Lauren's assistant found on her calendar, and neither do you yet. Ryan made coffee at 6:14 a.m. and told himself the night before was nothing. He told himself that on the drive to school with Emma, who sat in the back seat, eating a granola bar and narrating without pause the entire plot of a book about a girl who discovers her grandmother is secretly a cartographer. He told himself that while he signed Emma's permission slip for a field trip to the Science Museum, while he kissed her forehead at the drop-off circle, while he watched her run toward the building with her backpack bouncing and her ponytail swinging the way she always ran, like she was late for something wonderful. He told himself it on the subway into the office. He put his earbuds in and looked at his phone and told himself, with the particular discipline of a man who has built his entire adult life around not wanting things he cannot have, that whatever had happened in that car outside Lauren's building was just a long night and too much quiet, and the way city lights can make ordinary moments feel like more than they are. By the time he walked through the glass doors of Pierce Technologies on the 31st floor, he almost believed it. Then he saw Lauren's calendar. He was at his desk pulling up the morning's schedule the way he did every day, her 8 a.m. briefing materials, the 9:30 call with legal, the lunch she kept canceling with the PR firm when he noticed it. A new entry added sometime between midnight and this morning. Not added by him. Added by Lauren herself, which she almost never did because scheduling was Ryan's job, and Lauren knew it and respected the system they'd built. The entry said personal. 1200 to 100. Do not schedule over. That was it. No location. No attendees. No notes in the description field that usually said things like, remind me to bring the Hargrove deck or call ahead. They're always late. Just personal. Do not schedule over. Ryan stared at it for a moment. Then he closed the calendar tab and opened it again, as if it might say something different the second time. It didn't. He was still looking at it when his desk phone rang. Good morning, Lauren said. Her voice was the office voice, clean, professional, the version of her that ran the company, not the version from the car last night. Morning, he said. You've got the Reeves briefing at 8 and legal at 9:30. The Lim Group. He paused because they both knew there was no Lim Group emergency that had been the cover story. Sent a follow-up on the contract draft. I forwarded it. I saw it. Thank you. A beat. How's Emma? Good. She had a lot to say about cartography this morning. She always has a lot to say. And there it was, just barely underneath the professional register, something warmer, something that sounded like last night. Ryan, about last night. You don't have to. I want to apologize, she said. I put you in an uncomfortable position, calling you that late, pulling you away from Emma's bedtime, and then she stopped. I was tired, and it was a strange night, and I said something I shouldn't have. Ryan held the phone very still. You didn't say anything. A pause. You know what I mean. He did. He knew exactly what she meant. She meant the thing she'd almost said, the question that had started and stopped the way she'd looked at him through the car window before she walked inside. She was apologizing for the almost, which meant she'd thought about it, which meant it had kept her up too. Lauren, he said. It's fine, really. Last night we were both tired. It was late. Forget it. Right. Her voice was smooth again. Of course. 8 o'clock briefing, I'll be out in 5 minutes. She hung up. Ryan put the phone down. He looked at his computer screen. He looked at the calendar entry personal. 1200 to 100, and he made himself stop looking at it and open the Reeves briefing notes instead. He was very good when he needed to be at not looking at things. The 8 a.m. briefing was fine. The 9:30 call with legal was fine. Lauren came in and out of her office the way she always did. Decisive, focused, the kind of person who moved through a workday like a current. She stopped at his desk twice, once to ask about the revised terms on the Hargrove account, once to say that the coffee from the break room tasted like warm regret, and could he please call the new supplier. Both times she was perfectly normal. Both times she didn't look at him the way she had last night. Ryan did his job. He answered the phones, and managed the calendar, and drafted 2 emails she'd approved before sending, and coordinated with the events team about the company's annual client dinner in 3 weeks. He was good at his job. He had always been good at his job. That was, he knew, a significant part of why the arrangement worked. Why Lauren trusted him. Why she'd kept him for 3 years when she went through assistance the way some people go through umbrellas. He was reliable. He was discreet. He didn't make things complicated. He was thinking about all of this when Sarah Cho appeared at his desk at 11:47 a.m., carrying a paper bag that smelled like the Good Thai place on the corner of 5th and Broad. Sarah was the head of communications, 38 years old, and had been Lauren's friend since before the company existed. She was also, as Ryan had noted on multiple prior occasions, constitutionally incapable of minding her own business in the most affectionate possible sense. So, Sarah said, setting the bag on the edge of his desk without being invited. How bad was it? Ryan kept typing. I don't know what you're talking about. Gerald. She said the name the way you'd say food poisoning. Lauren texted me at midnight saying she was going to fire me. She's not going to fire you. I know, but scale of 1 to 10. Gerald. Ryan stopped typing. He leaned back in his chair and looked at Sarah, who was watching him with the expression of someone who has just sat down with popcorn. He drove her, he said. She couldn't leave. Sarah's face collapsed. Oh no. And he explained decentralized finance. Oh no. For approximately an hour and 40 minutes. Ryan. Sarah pressed her hand over her mouth. I had no idea. His profile said he was in tech investment and... Sarah. He said her name gently. Lauren is 41 years old and she runs a 400-person company. She doesn't need help meeting men. She does, though, Sarah said. And she said it in a way that was not unkind, not pushy, just plainly the way you say a true thing. That's the problem. She's surrounded by people all day and she goes home to an empty apartment. She paused, looking at Ryan with that particular Sarah Cho look, sharp and patient at the same time. You know she does. Ryan looked at his keyboard. That's not my department. It's everyone's department who cares about her. Sarah picked up the paper bag. I brought her lunch. I'm going to apologize. Is she in? She's got something personal at noon. Sarah's eyebrows went up. She put something personal on the calendar. Apparently. She never does that. Sarah looked at the closed office door, then back at Ryan. Huh. She left the bag on the corner of his desk. Hold on to that in case she's back by 1. Pad CU. She likes it. Ryan picked up the bag without commenting. Sarah started to walk away, then turned back the way Sarah always did, like she'd just remembered the thing that was actually on her mind. Ryan, she said. She called you last night. Not a car service. Not the front desk. You. I'm her assistant. It was midnight. Sarah held his gaze for just a moment longer than was strictly necessary. Then, just something to think about. And she went. At 12:08, Ryan's cell phone buzzed. Not the desk line, his personal phone, which meant it wasn't work. Can you come down to the lobby? L. He stared at the text for a beat. Then he told the receptionist he'd be back in 10. Took the elevator down and found Lauren standing near the building's front entrance, still in her work clothes, but with her coat on, like she'd been outside and just come back in. She was holding 2 cups of coffee from the place across the street, not the office coffee, the real coffee, the kind she got when she wanted to think. She handed him one without a word. They walked outside. The lunch hour crowd pushed past them on both sides, and neither of them spoke until they were a few steps clear of the main entrance, standing near the planter box that the building management kept full of seasonal flowers no one ever seemed to look at. I lied, Lauren said. She was looking across the street. This morning, when I said I was sorry for saying something I shouldn't have. Ryan held the coffee with both hands. Lauren. I'm not sorry, she said. I've been telling myself for 3 years that I should be. That it's inappropriate and it's complicated, and there are 17 very good reasons why nothing should ever. But I'm standing here, and I've been up since 5 in the morning, and I'm tired, Ryan. I'm tired of the version of me that knows better. She turned and looked at him directly the way she'd looked at him last night in the car. No armor, no gloss, no CEO. Just Lauren. I've wanted to say something to you for a very long time, and last night I almost did. And then I stopped myself, and I went upstairs, and I sat on my couch in a green dress at midnight, and ate crackers out of the box, and thought about all the reasons it would be a terrible idea. Ryan looked at her. How many crackers? She blinked. What? How many crackers? Approximately. Her expression shifted, caught off guard, which was rare. That's not an entire sleeve, Ryan, that's not the point. The point, he said quietly, is that you came down here and you're holding coffee, and you're about to say something that is going to change the way we work together. And I need you to know that I am aware of that, and I'm still here. She was quiet. A cab honked somewhere behind them. The city kept moving. I've been in love with you, Lauren said, and her voice did not waver. It was the steadiest he'd ever heard her. For a long time. I don't know when it started exactly. I think it was that night in Seattle, the conference 2 years ago when Emma got sick and you stayed on the phone with her pediatrician for 45 minutes from the hotel bar and you were calm the whole time. Just completely calm. Like the world could fall apart and you'd still be the person holding it together. She exhaled. That was when I knew. I didn't want to know. But I did. Ryan stood very still. Seattle, he said. Seattle. He remembered that night. Emma had run a fever of 103, and he'd been 3,000 miles away. He remembered the bar because he'd been in the middle of the networking dinner Lauren had dragged the team to, and he'd stepped out with his phone and sat on a bar stool in the corner for 45 minutes talking Emma's pediatrician through symptoms, while the television above the bar played a baseball game with the sound off. He remembered coming back to the table. He remembered Lauren looking at him across the room with an expression he hadn't been able to read. He could read it now. Why didn't you say anything? He said. You work for me. Her voice was steady, but her hands weren't. She was gripping the coffee cup slightly harder than she needed to. You work for me. You have Emma. You have a life that you've built very carefully and very deliberately, and I know that because I see it every day. And I was not going to be the person who came in and complicated that. I've seen what happens when lines get crossed at work. I've watched other companies go sideways over it. I was not going to do that to you. So you said nothing. For 3 years. She said it simply, like a fact. Like she'd made her peace with it a long time ago and was only now letting someone else see the cost of it. Ryan looked at the coffee cup in his hands. He thought about Seattle. He thought about Emma asleep under her blanket with the stuffed elephant named Gerald. He thought about Sarah saying she called you not a car service, not the front desk, you. He thought about sitting in that armchair in the dark last night and staring at the ceiling and knowing without yet having words for it that something had shifted. I have Emma, he said, and she is the center of everything. That is not going to change, and it's not something I'm willing to compromise. I know that. And you're my boss. We work together every day, which means if this goes badly, I know. It's not just awkward, it's my livelihood. It's Emma's school and this apartment and everything I've built. Ryan. Lauren stepped closer, not crowding him, just close enough that he couldn't look away. I know. I have thought about every single one of those things more times than you will ever know. I'm not asking you to throw anything away. I'm just tired of pretending that nothing is here. He looked at her face. He had looked at this face across a desk, across conference tables, across the back seat of cars in a dozen different cities for 3 years. He had read her moods and anticipated her needs and learned the particular silence that meant she was thinking versus the silence that meant she was decided. He knew her the way you know someone you have chosen every day to pay attention to. He had paid attention for a long time. I need to think, he said. I know. I'm not Lauren. I'm not saying no. I'm saying I need to think. Something moved across her face, relief maybe, or the thing just behind relief. That's fair, she said. That's more than fair. And I need you to not make it weird at the office while I'm thinking. She almost smiled. I can do that. And the Gerald thing. We are never speaking of Gerald again. I just want it acknowledged. Ethereum is a scam, and Gerald is a cautionary tale. Are we done? Ryan looked at her for a long moment. Then he looked down at the coffee cup, and he felt not decided, not certain, but something quieter than that. Something that felt like the exhale after you've been holding your breath so long, you've stopped noticing. I'll see you upstairs, he said. She nodded. She turned and walked back inside, and Ryan stood outside the building in the thin autumn sun and drank his coffee and looked at the sky between the buildings and thought very seriously about what it would mean to stop training himself not to want things. Emma would have an opinion about Lauren. That much was certain. Emma had opinions about everything, about whether grape juice was better than apple, about the correct way to fold a napkin, about whether seahorses were underrated as a species. She would have thoughts. She had met Lauren once at the company's family picnic last June. She had told Ryan on the way home with the authority of a 7-year-old who has arrived at a firm conclusion that your boss talks to you like you're a person. Ryan had not entirely known what to do with that. He did now a little more. He finished the coffee. He went back upstairs. He sat at his desk and pulled up Lauren's afternoon schedule and began the work of the day the way he always did, methodically, carefully attending to the shape of someone else's life, because that was what he was good at, and that was what he had chosen. But something had changed in the lobby. He could feel it sitting there, the same desk, the same screen, the same hum of the office around him. Something had shifted in the foundation, subtle but real, the way you feel the first tremor before you've registered that the ground moved. Lauren was behind the closed door of her office. Sarah was somewhere down the hall, probably scheming. Emma was at school learning something wonderful that she would tell him about tonight in the car, with the full force of her attention, expecting him to be equally amazed. His whole life was here in this radius. He had built it that way deliberately, carefully, out of the belief that a small life held tightly was better than a large one dropped. but Lauren had been standing in it the whole time, and she had never once, not once in 3 years, let him see it. Until last night, outside a restaurant, when a man named Gerald had explained cryptocurrency for an hour and 40 minutes, and something in her had finally broken open. Ryan looked at his desk phone. He looked at the closed office door. He thought sometimes the thing you've been protecting yourself from is already inside. Then he answered the phone because it was ringing and he was at work, and Ryan Carter did not stop doing his job just because the ground had shifted. But he was thinking about it. He was thinking about it constantly. He made it through the rest of the afternoon by staying busy, which had always been Ryan's most reliable coping mechanism. There were emails to draft and calls to return, and a vendor dispute about the catering contract for the annual client dinner that somehow became his problem, despite having nothing to do with his actual job description. He handled all of it with the kind of focused efficiency that people who don't know what to do with their feelings are very good at. Lauren stayed in her office until 4:30. When she came out, she dropped a folder on his desk, the revised Hargrove terms, and said, "Typo on page 6, third paragraph. Also, can you move the Friday board prep to Thursday morning? I have something at 2 on Friday." She didn't look at him differently than she ever did. She was completely, almost aggressively normal. "Done," he said. "Thank you." She went back in. The door closed. Ryan moved the board prep to Thursday and thought she is a more disciplined person than I am. He meant it as a compliment. Emma called at 3:45 from the after-school program, which she was allowed to do on Tuesdays and Thursdays. She had a lot to say about a boy in her class named Marcus, who had claimed that sharks were not technically fish, and she wanted Ryan to confirm on the record that this was wrong. "He's wrong," Ryan said. "I told him that." "Good." "He said I was being argumentative." "You were being correct. Those are different things." "That's what I said." A pause. "Dad, are you okay? You sound like when you're thinking about something else." Ryan closed his eyes briefly. His 7-year-old daughter. "I'm good, Em. I'll see you at 6. "Okay. Can we have the pasta tonight with the bread?" "Yeah, we can have the pasta." "With the bread, though." "With the bread." She hung up. Ryan sat with the phone against his chest for a moment and thought about how Emma had told him at the company picnic in June that Lauren talked to him like he was a person. And he thought about Lauren in the lobby holding that coffee cup too tightly, saying, "I'm tired of the version of me that knows better." He put the phone down and went back to work. On Wednesday, nothing happened. On Thursday, nothing happened. Lauren was professional and precise, and gave no indication outwardly that anything had changed between them. Ryan matched her energy because that was what she seemed to need, and because he still hadn't arrived at a decision, and he didn't think it was fair to leave her in suspense while he worked through it. He kept the office the way it always was. Steady, functional, the two of them moving through the architecture of the workday they'd built together over 3 years. But the lobby had happened, and Ryan found in the evenings after Emma was asleep that he could not stop returning to it. He called his older brother Marcus, not the shark Marcus, his brother, on Thursday night. Marcus lived in Cleveland, had been married for 12 years, had 3 kids and a mortgage, and a riding lawnmower he referred to as his emotional support machine. He was the steadiest person Ryan knew, and also the most direct, which sometimes were not comfortable qualities to have in the same person. "She told you she's been in love with you," Marcus said on the phone with the flat declarative energy of a man who has heard a lot of things in his life and is not easily rattled. "Your boss?" "Yes." "For 3 years." "That's what she said." "And she waited 3 years to tell you because she didn't want to complicate your life." "Right." Marcus was quiet for a moment. Ryan could hear the television in the background, sports. Probably Marcus always had sports on, and the distant sound of one of his kids running upstairs. "Ryan," Marcus said, "I like this woman. I haven't even met her, and I like her." "That's not helpful." "I know." Marcus exhaled. "What's the problem exactly?" "Walk me through it." She's my boss. She signs my checks. She has all the power in the situation. And even if her intentions are completely honest, if this goes wrong... Everything's gone wrong before? Marcus said. Diane went wrong. You survived it. I had Emma through that. Emma is why I survived it. And Emma is exactly why I can't afford to blow up my job. Ryan. Marcus's voice was quiet now. Is this about the job? Or is it about the fact that if you say yes and it works, you won't have a reason to keep the walls up anymore? Ryan stood in his kitchen and looked at the refrigerator and said nothing. Because, Marcus continued, you built a very good small life. It's a genuinely good life, and I'm not saying that to be dismissive. But I've watched you, brother, and you are so careful. You are so careful with everything. With Emma, with work, with every dollar, with every decision. And careful is good. Careful is responsible. But sometimes careful is just another word for scared. I know the difference, Ryan said. Do you? He did not answer immediately, which was its own kind of answer. What does Emma think? Marcus asked. She's met the woman. Emma thinks she talks to me like I'm a person. Marcus laughed a real warm laugh. Out of the mouths of babes. She's 7. 7-year-olds don't have the filters yet. They just say what they see. A pause. Think about it, Ryan. That's all I'm saying. You're allowed to want something. Ryan went to bed that night and lay in the dark and thought you're allowed to want something. It was such a simple thing. He'd heard it before from therapists and friends and the back pages of parenting books that were really about the parents as much as the children. But it was different when your brother said it at 10:30 on a Thursday night while a riding lawnmower sat in his garage in Cleveland. He thought about Lauren in Seattle, sitting across a table at a networking dinner, watching him talk to a pediatrician on the phone. He thought about her holding all of that, holding it for 2 years after Seattle, and saying nothing, protecting his life while her own stayed empty. He thought that is the act of someone who loves carefully. He fell asleep somewhere after midnight, and he did not have an answer yet, but the shape of one was beginning to form in the dark. The client dinner was on Friday evening, which meant Thursday was a pressure cooker. Lauren had back-to-back meetings from 8 in the morning until 5, and Ryan ran the logistics of the Friday event from his desk vendor's seating charts, the AV team's last-minute panic about the projector, the fact that one of the major clients had just emailed to say his wife was now gluten-free, and could the menu be adjusted 20 hours before the event. Ryan handled all of it with the calm efficiency that Lauren had once described to Sarah as Ryan's superpower, and which Ryan privately thought of as just, this is what I do. At 5:15, Lauren stuck her head out of her office. Her jacket was off. She looked like a woman who had been in 7 meetings and was currently holding herself together on coffee and willpower alone. Tell me the dinner is under control, she said. The dinner is under control. The Hartwell gluten situation. Handled. The kitchen is doing a separate plate. I confirmed with them 40 minutes ago. The projector. A V team will be there at 6 tomorrow. I'll be there at 6:15 to make sure they actually did what they said. Lauren looked at him. You're going to be there at 6:15? The event doesn't start until 7. I know. Ryan, you don't have to... Lauren. He said her name the way you say someone's name when they're about to argue themselves into something unnecessary. I'll be there. Emma is sleeping at my brother's well at Mrs. Patton's, but Marcus called and offered to drive up from Cleveland and take Emma for the weekend, which... He stopped because he hadn't meant to say that part. It had come out. Lauren went very still. Marcus is coming up. He called yesterday, said he wanted to see Emma. It's not... Ryan. Her voice was measured. Did you call your brother about us? He held her gaze. I called him. Yes. She looked at him for a long moment. Something moved through her expression, not quite surprise, not quite hope, but somewhere between them. And what did Marcus say? He said he liked you. Before I'd even finished the story. The corner of Lauren's mouth moved. He's never met me. I know. Ryan looked at his desk, then back at her. He's a good judge of character. Lauren leaned against the doorframe and folded her arms, not defensively, just the posture of someone who is recalibrating. And Emma's going to be at Mrs. Patton's Friday night. Or Marcus will drive up Saturday morning and take her for the weekend. He's flexible. And you told me this because... I told you this because... Ryan said quietly. I'm still thinking. And I wanted you to know that I'm thinking seriously. She held his gaze for a long, steady moment. Okay, she said. Soft. Okay. She went back into her office. Ryan turned back to his screen and looked at the seating chart for approximately 3 seconds before realizing he was not seeing it at all. The client dinner was at the Aldridge, which was the kind of event space that made companies look more established than their square footage suggested. Lauren wore black, which she almost always did for events, and Ryan wore the dark blazer he kept in his office for exactly these occasions. He had been at events with Lauren before, many of them. It was part of the job. He stood in the back and managed the moving pieces, and made sure the projector worked, and the food came out on time, and that the right people got time with Lauren, and the wrong conversations got quietly interrupted. That was the job. He knew how to do it. What he was not as prepared for was Thomas Whitfield. Thomas Whitfield was 44, silver-haired, the managing director of Whitfield Capital, which was one of Pierce Technologies' largest investment partners. He was handsome in the specific expensive way that some men in finance are handsome, like he'd always had enough money to take care of himself and enough confidence to believe that made him interesting. He had been to the annual dinner before. Ryan had dealt with him before. He was perfectly civil. But Ryan had not before tonight watched him put his hand on Lauren's arm twice in 10 minutes while they talked near the bar. Ryan noticed this from across the room. He told himself he was noticing it in a professional capacity, keeping track of the room managing dynamics, which was literally his job. He told himself this with moderate success. The third time Whitfield touched Lauren's arm, Sarah materialized next to Ryan with a champagne glass she was not drinking and said very quietly, "So that's been building for a few months." Ryan looked at her sideways. "What has?" "Thomas Whitfield is very interested in your boss." Sarah sipped the champagne she was not drinking. "He asked her to lunch in September. She said she was busy. He asked again in October. She was busy again." Ryan looked across the room. Lauren was saying something to Whitfield, professional, engaged, giving him the version of her attention that meant she was being polite and thorough, not the version that meant she was actually interested. "She turned him down twice," Ryan said. "Twice that I know of." Sarah glanced at him. "Thomas is smart, successful, available, and he's been very patient." Another pause. "She keeps saying no. I've been trying to figure out why." Ryan did not say anything. Sarah looked at him with that particular look. "I think I figured it out," she said. "Sarah." "I'm just saying what I see, Ryan. I'm not saying anything else." Across the room, Whitfield said something that made Lauren smile, the polished smile, the public one, not the real one. Lauren glanced up, and her eyes found Ryan across the space the way they always did at these events. The instinctive check-in they'd developed over years of working rooms together. She held his gaze for a fraction of a second. Then she looked back at Whitfield. Ryan turned to Sarah. "Where are we on the dessert timing?" Sarah accepted the subject change with grace because Sarah was, under all her meddling, a smart and decent person. "Pastry team says 15 minutes. "Good. Make sure the Hartwell table gets the separate plate before the general service goes out. I don't want him feeling singled out." "Already on it." Sarah started to move away, then turned back. Of course she did. "Ryan, last thing. Whitfield is going to ask her tonight. He told his colleague who told me because people tell me things." She held his gaze. "I thought you should know." She walked away. Ryan stood where he was for a moment, looking at nothing in particular. Then he went to check on the dessert service because there was a job to do, and he was going to do it. But he felt something move in his chest, sharp and clarifying, the way cold water clarifies, and he recognized it because he was a man who had spent years being very honest with himself in private. It was not the comfortable, manageable kind of feeling he'd been telling himself this was. It was the kind that meant something. The dinner wound down at 9:30. Guests filtered out. Lauren stood near the entrance saying goodbyes with the ease of someone who had done it 1,000 times, warm and precise, the kind of exit conversation that made people feel seen without actually taking long. Ryan was packing the briefing folders near the back when he heard her voice shift, just slightly the edge of it, and he looked up. Whitfield was standing with her near the coat room. Ryan couldn't hear the words from where he stood, but he could read the body language, the way you read weather, the way Whitfield stepped slightly closer, the way Lauren's posture didn't move toward him, the slight angle of her chin that meant she was being polite about something that required effort. Then Whitfield reached into his jacket pocket and held something out, a card maybe, or something written. Lauren looked at it. She took it because she was too professional not to. She said something that made Whitfield nod, and the nod was the nod of a man who has been told no, but is choosing to hear it as not yet. He left. Lauren stood for a moment with whatever was in her hand, and then she looked across the room. Ryan was already looking at her. She walked over. The room was nearly empty. The catering staff was moving quietly between tables. She stopped in front of him and held out what Whitfield had given her. It was a card-heavy stock embossed with something handwritten on the back. Ryan looked at it without touching it. "Dinner. Whenever you're ready. Thomas." "He asked," Ryan said. "He asked." "What did you say?" "I said I'd think about it." She was watching him carefully. "That's what I always say. It's what I said in September. It's what I said in October." Ryan looked at the card. He looked at Lauren. He was very aware in that moment of the particular silence of a room that has been full of people and is now almost empty, the way it echoes differently, the way it makes everything feel slightly exposed. "Why do you keep saying you'll think about it?" he said. Lauren tilted her head very slightly, like the question was almost funny, like it was the most obvious question in the world. "You know why," she said. And the thing was, he did. He had known since the lobby on Wednesday. He had known since Seattle, maybe if he was being honest, the way Marcus had asked him to be honest. He had known for a long time underneath all the careful and the practical and the "this is my job" he had known. He had just been waiting until the knowing was heavier than the fear. He picked up the briefing folders from the table. He handed Lauren her coat from the chair beside him. She took it, and their hands were close, not touching. Just close the way things that have been circling each other for 3 years eventually get close. "I'll drive you home," he said. "Ryan." "I'll drive you home," he said again, quieter. "And I want to finish the conversation we started in the lobby." Lauren looked at him. In the low light of the emptying room with the catering staff somewhere behind them and the city pressing against the windows, she looked like someone who had been waiting a very long time for the ground to stop moving and was only now cautiously starting to believe it might. "Okay," she said. She put her coat on. Ryan picked up his jacket and the folders, and they walked out together through the side entrance, and the October air hit them both at the same time, and neither of them said anything until they reached the car. And even then, for a long moment, they didn't speak. They just sat in the particular quiet that belongs to people who have finally run out of reasons not to say the true thing. Ryan started the engine. He looked straight ahead. "Marcus said something to me the other night," he said. "He said sometimes careful is just another word for scared." Lauren was quiet. "I've been scared," Ryan said. "I want you to know that. Not of you, of what it means, what it costs, Emma, the job, all of it." He paused. "But I've been thinking about Seattle, and the lobby, and the fact that you turned down Thomas Whitfield 3 times because you were waiting." He looked at her. "You were waiting, Lauren." She didn't deny it. "I was waiting," she said simply. "That means something to me." His voice was low and steady. "It means a lot to me." Ryan, I'm not done. He took a breath. I have Emma to think about. She is my first consideration in every decision I make. That is not going to change. But Marcus reminded me that there's a difference between protecting her and using her as a reason not to live. A pause. I've been doing both. I need to stop doing the second one. Lauren turned to face him fully. Her eyes were bright, and not he was almost certain from the cold. What are you saying? She said. I'm saying, Ryan said carefully, that I want to do this right. I'm not jumping into anything. There are conversations that have to happen. With HR. With us. With Emma eventually, when the time is right. He looked at her. But I'm saying yes to the conversation. I'm saying I'm not going to keep training myself to look away. The city hummed around them. Lauren Pierce, who had run a company at 41 and closed $47 million deals and stood in front of boards and never showed the seams. Lauren Pierce pressed her hand briefly over her mouth and breathed. Okay, she said. Her voice was different. It was the real voice, not the office voice, not the lobby voice. Something under even those something she didn't usually let out. Okay, Ryan. He nodded once. He looked forward. He pulled the car out of the lot and drove, and Lauren sat beside him in the passenger seat, the same way she had on Thursday night outside Marchetti's, except nothing was the same at all. For the record, Lauren said after a full minute of quiet, yeah. If Emma decides she doesn't like me, I'm going to take it very personally. Ryan felt something loosen in his chest, the long, tightly held thing. She already told me you talk to me like I'm a person. Lauren laughed. The real laugh, the short, surprised one that escaped before she could stop it. Smart kid. I know. He glanced at her sideways. She's going to want to ask you about sharks. Sharks. She has a position on sharks. She'll want yours. I have very little position on sharks. You'll have to develop one. He paused. She doesn't respect intellectual neutrality on the subject. Lauren was smiling now, not the public smile, not the professional one, the one that made her look younger and less armored, and like the version of herself she kept tucked behind everything else. I can do that, she said. Ryan drove. The city came apart into quieter streets around them, and neither of them tried to fill the silence anymore because they didn't need to. The hard thing had been said. The waiting was over. Everything between them was still complicated and uncertain and full of the kind of details that would need to be handled carefully in daylight with clear heads. But tonight in the car, neither of them was thinking about that yet. Tonight they were just two people who had finally said the true thing and discovered, with the particular relief of it, that the true thing had been waiting patiently all along. Ryan thought about Marcus's voice on the phone, "You're allowed to want something." He thought about Emma asleep under her blanket with the stuffed elephant named Gerald. He thought about Lauren in Seattle, watching him across a room and knowing and saying nothing for 2 years. He thought, I see you. I've always seen you. I just needed to stop pretending I didn't. He didn't say it out loud. Not yet. There was a time for that, and it wasn't in a moving car on a Friday night with the October air coming through the vents and everything still so new and fragile and real. But he was thinking it. And Lauren beside him, looking out the window with her hands quiet in her lap, and the public version of herself entirely gone, Lauren was thinking it too. He dropped her off at 11:17. This time she got out of the car without the long pause, without the almost said thing hanging in the air between them. She got out, turned back, and looked at him through the window, the same way she had Thursday night, but different. The expression was different. It was not the face of someone deciding whether to say something. It was the face of someone who had already said it, and was still standing, and was surprised to find that the ground had not given way. Saturday, she said. If Marcus brings Emma back. He's driving up in the morning, Ryan said. They'll be back by noon. Okay. She held the door frame for a moment. Ryan, thank you. For the dinner tonight. For all of it. Don't say it's the job, she said. Not tonight. He didn't say it. Good night, Lauren. Good night. She let go of the door. She walked inside. This time she didn't look back through the window, and Ryan found that too felt different. Not like absence, but like someone who no longer needed to check whether he was still there. He drove home. He sat in his kitchen for a while without turning on more than the stove light, and he thought about what the next week looked like, and whether he was making a decision, or whether the decision had already been made for him by 3 years of proximity and one disastrous blind date, and a man named Gerald who did not understand that some things are not about cryptocurrency. He thought about Emma. He went to bed. He slept better than he had in 4 days. Marcus arrived at 11:45 on Saturday with Emma in the back seat of his Jeep, and Emma came through the apartment door, already talking the way she always came home from Marcus's, overstimulated and joyful and at full volume. She had been to a natural history museum. She had seen a blue whale skeleton. She had opinions. It was huge, Dad. Like the skeleton was the whole ceiling. Marcus said, blue whales are the biggest animal that ever lived, and I said, what about dinosaurs? And he said, blue whales are bigger than most dinosaurs, and I said, Ryan caught her by the shoulders gently. Breathe. She breathed. Then, can we look it up? We can look it up. He looked over her head at Marcus, who was leaning in the doorway with his jacket still on, and the expression of a man who has had a very energetic 20 hours. Marcus was 3 years older than Ryan, broader in the shoulders, with the same dark eyes and the habit of going quiet when he was paying attention. She's something else, Marcus said. I know. Emma was already at the laptop. Marcus stepped inside, and the two brothers stood in the kitchen with the particular ease of people who grew up in the same house and never fully have to explain themselves to each other. How'd it go last night? Marcus said. Quiet, so Emma couldn't hear. It went. Ryan handed him a cup of coffee. I told her yes, to the conversation. Not, it's not resolved, it's just open now. We're going to figure it out carefully. Marcus accepted the coffee and nodded once slowly, like that was exactly the right answer. And Emma? Not yet. There's nothing to tell her yet. When there is, I'll tell her the right way. She's going to want to weigh in. I know, she always weighs in. She told me in the car, Marcus said, that she thinks you work too hard and you need a friend. Ryan looked at his daughter, who was now reading facts about blue whales aloud to no one in particular. She said that verbatim. Marcus drank his coffee. 7 years old, and she already knows what you need before you do. He paused. She's going to be fine, Ryan, whatever happens. Ryan said nothing for a moment. Then, yeah, I know. Do you? He looked at Marcus. His brother looked back with the steady, unhurried patience of someone who has had this conversation before and is willing to have it again. Ryan thought about the walls Marcus had mentioned, the careful, the protected, the small life held tightly. He thought about the armchair in Emma's room and all the nights he'd sat in it telling himself that this was enough, and it was. It had been. I'm working on it, Ryan said. Marcus clapped him once on the shoulder. That's all I'm asking. He texted Lauren at 2:15 on Saturday afternoon. Emma's home. Museum. Blue whale facts. She has a lot to say. Lauren replied in 4 minutes. I want to hear all of it. Also, I looked up sharks. Ryan stared at the text for a moment. Then he typed, You did not. Whale sharks are technically the biggest fish. Not a whale. A fish. I'm ready. He sat at the kitchen table and read that text and felt something happen in his chest that he didn't have a precise word for. It was not the dramatic, breathless feeling that people described in movies. It was quieter than that. It was the feeling of something settling the way a house settles in the evening, a small structural sound that means the foundation is holding. He typed, She's going to test you. Fair warning. Let her. A pause. Then, how are you doing? Actually, he looked at the question for a moment. Then he typed, honestly scared. And okay. Both at the same time. She replied, that's the most honest thing you've ever said to me. Don't get used to it. Too late. And then, after a beat, Ryan. I'm scared too. I want you to know that. I'm not. I know this looks like I have all the power in this situation. I know that's complicated. I've been thinking about it all night. He read that text and read it again. He typed, we'll handle it. Together. He put his phone down. Emma appeared from her room, still carrying the museum pamphlet. Dad, whale sharks are bigger than great whites. I know. Did you know that? I just learned it. She looked at him with the evaluating squint she'd inherited from God knows where. You're smiling. I'm allowed to smile. You don't usually smile at your phone. She tilted her head. Is it Marcus? No. Is it work? No, M. She considered this with the thoroughness she applied to all things. Then, apparently satisfied, she held up the pamphlet. Can we put this on the refrigerator? Yeah, we can put it on the refrigerator. She went to find a magnet. Ryan looked at his phone. He thought she's going to be fine. And this time when he thought it, he believed it all the way down. Monday arrived the way Mondays always did, too fast and without apology. Ryan was at his desk at 7:50, which was 10 minutes earlier than usual, for no reason he was willing to examine out loud. Lauren arrived at 8:05, which was also slightly earlier than usual. They looked at each other across the space of his desk, and there was one of something that was not professional and not hidden, just present, just real. Then Lauren said, Good morning. The Hargrove call moved to 10. Did legal send the amended version? Came in at 7:30, already in your inbox. Good. She paused. How's Emma? She wants to discuss whale sharks with you at your earliest convenience. Lauren almost smiled. I'm ready for her. She went into her office. The morning ran the way their mornings always ran, and Ryan found something surprising in that the rhythm of it was not broken. The work was the same. Lauren was the same precise, decisive, moving through the day with the directional energy that had always made her exceptional at what she did. He was the same. The gap between them was the same gap. It had always been professional and appropriate, the one they'd always maintained. Except now, they both knew it was a choice. That was different. The gap being deliberate and acknowledged and held open with intention. That was new, and it changed the texture of everything, made the ordinary things feel like they had weight. Sarah noticed. Sarah, of course, noticed. She stopped at Ryan's desk at 11 with the paper bag from the Thai place, which was apparently becoming a tradition, and set it down and looked at him with the expression of someone who does not need you to tell her anything, because she has already assembled the information herself. Something's different, she said. Ryan kept typing. Good morning, Sarah. It's not a good morning, it's an observation. Something is different. She looked at Lauren's closed door, then back at Ryan. Did something happen at the dinner Friday night? Whitfield asked her to dinner, Ryan said. I know. I told you he was going to. She paused. What did she do? She said she'd think about it. And then, Ryan looked at Sarah steadily. That's between Lauren and Whitfield. Sarah looked at him for a long time. She was, as Ryan had noted many times, very good at the long look. It was a communication tool she deployed with precision. Ryan, she said slowly. Did you say something to her? Sarah. I'm asking because I care about her, and because I've watched you not say something for 3 years, and I'm tired on your behalf. She straightened up. You don't have to tell me anything. I'm just saying whatever's different, I approve of it. On the record. Your approval is noted. Don't be sarcastic. I'm not. I mean it. It means something. He said it plainly, without deflection. Sarah blinked. Then she looked at him with something softer than her usual sharpness, something almost maternal, though she would have denied it strenuously. Okay, she said. She pushed the bag closer. Pad CU. Tell Lauren it's an apology for Gerald. You already apologized for Gerald. I'm apologizing again. I will continue apologizing for Gerald at regular intervals for the foreseeable future. She left. The HR conversation happened on Tuesday. Lauren had arranged it herself, called Diane Mercer, the company's head of human resources, directly, which meant by the time Ryan walked into the small conference room at 2 in the afternoon, Diane already had the framework. She was 53, methodical, and had the specific energy of someone who has navigated complicated workplace situations before and simply wants to make sure everyone survives. Ryan sat down. Lauren was already there. They had not coordinated their expressions or their body language, but Ryan noticed they were both doing the same thing. Sitting up straight, hands on the table, the posture of people who are being honest and want to be seen as such. Diane looked at them both. "Okay," she said. "Let me be clear about a few things before we talk through the specifics." They both nodded. What you're describing, a potential relationship between a CEO and a direct report, requires careful handling. Not because it's prohibited, but because the power differential is real, and it needs to be formally acknowledged and managed. That means documentation. It means a clear agreement about what happens to Ryan's role, to his reporting structure, to the chain of decision-making around his performance and compensation. She looked at Ryan. You would need a secondary reporting line, not instead of Lauren. Your work is still intertwined, but someone else who signs off on reviews and raises and any decisions that directly affect your employment. I understand that, Ryan said. And if this relationship ends, Diane said it the way she said everything without apology. There needs to be a plan for that too. Not because we assume the worst, but because having the plan means you don't have to make hard decisions under emotional pressure. That's fair, Lauren said. Diane looked at her. Lauren, you're the CEO. You have the most to manage here politically. The board doesn't need to know unless there's a material change in structure, but if it comes out, and these things often do, you want to be ahead of it. That means being transparent with the people who need to know on your timeline before someone else makes it a story. I've thought about that, Lauren said. And I'm going to talk to the board chair, Carol. She and I have a working relationship that can hold this kind of conversation. She paused. I'd rather tell her directly than have her hear it another way. Diane nodded. Good. She made a note. Ryan, I want to ask you something directly, and I want you to know that your answer stays in this room. Okay. Is there any part of what's happening here that feels like pressure? Like this is something that's being offered to you from a position of authority in a way that makes it hard to say no? Ryan held her gaze. No, he said. Lauren told me how she felt and asked me to think about it. She told me in the lobby of this building on her lunch break, and then she went back to work and gave me 4 days to sit with it. I had every opportunity to say no. I'm here because I chose to be here. Diane looked at him for a long moment. Then she looked at Lauren. And Lauren. Is Ryan's job in any way contingent on this? Absolutely not, Lauren said. If Ryan decides at any point that he doesn't want to pursue this, his position is unchanged. Full stop. I'm going to put that in writing, Diane said. Not because I doubt either of you. Because writing it down protects you both, and it protects the company. And in my experience, the things you put in writing are the things you actually honor under pressure. She made another note. Okay, here's what I suggest. We start with a documented disclosure form standard. Both of you sign it, it goes in the file. Then we identify who Ryan's secondary reviewer will be. I'd recommend Helen Park in operations. She's been here long enough to have context without being too close to Lauren's inner circle. Helen's good, Ryan said. Agreed, said Lauren. And we revisit in 90 days to make sure the working relationship is functional and that nothing's fallen through the cracks. Diane set down her pen and looked at them both with something that was not quite warmth, but was adjacent to it, the particular expression of someone who has seen hard things go wrong and is quietly rooting for this to be different. You two are both adults with a lot at stake, and you're handling this like adults. That is genuinely not as common as you'd think. She stood. "I'll have the paperwork ready by Thursday." They thanked her. They walked out of the conference room into the hallway and stood for a moment side by side without speaking. Then Lauren said, "Helen Park." "Good choice," Ryan said. "She's direct. She'll be fair." "She's going to think this is extremely unusual." "It is extremely unusual." Lauren looked at him sideways. "Are you okay?" "That was a lot of practical." "The practical is good," Ryan said. "The practical is how we protect it." She looked at him for a moment. "When did you get wise?" "I've always been wise. You've just been too busy closing $47 million deals to notice." She pressed her lips together to keep from smiling and completely failed. "You're insufferable. You've known that for 3 years." "I have," she said. And the smile broke through the real one, the unguarded one. Right there in the hallway outside the small conference room with the fluorescent lights overhead and the sounds of the office carrying on around them. Lauren Pierce smiled at him the way she almost never let herself smile, and Ryan looked at it and thought, "Yes, that's the one. That's the one I've been seeing out of the corner of my eye for 3 years." He looked away first because they were at work, and because Diane had just done them both a considerable favor, and the least they could do was be professional in the hallway immediately afterward. "Back to work," he said. "Back to work," she agreed. They went back to work. Wednesday passed. Thursday passed. The documentation came from Diane on Thursday afternoon, 2 pages clear language, both their signatures. Ryan read it twice before he signed it. Lauren signed hers without reading it, then caught Ryan's expression and went back and read it. "I trust Diane," she said. "I know. Read it anyway." She read it. "She covered everything." "She covered everything," Ryan agreed. Friday morning arrived, and Emma's school sent a note that the field trip to the Science Museum was rescheduled to the following Thursday, which Emma found extremely devastating and told Ryan about in great detail at breakfast. Ryan listened with full attention the way he always did, and thought about how this kitchen, this table, Emma's voice and her cereal and the morning sun coming through the window, this was the core of it. This was what everything else had to hold. He thought about what Diane had asked him. Is there any part of this that feels like pressure? No. That was the true answer, and he'd given it. But the full answer, the one he'd kept to himself, was more layered than that. The full answer was, Lauren Pierce had spent 3 years protecting his life from a distance. She had turned down Thomas Whitfield. She had stood in the lobby and told him the truth, and then given him 4 days of silence and professional normalcy, and not once, not one single time, tried to tip the scales in her favor. She had given him a clean choice. That was an act of love. He recognized it now, named it plainly in his own mind, the word he'd been circling. He was not a man who used that word casually. He had been careful with it ever since Diane, Emma's mother, and the slow dissolution of something that had never quite been right. But he recognized love when it was careful with him. And Lauren had been careful with him in her way for a very long time. Dad. Emma was looking at him with the evaluating squint. "You're doing the thing again." "What thing?" "The thinking about something else thing, but this time you're smiling." Ryan poured her more orange juice. "Eat your cereal." "I'm just saying." She ate a spoonful with the air of someone who has made her point and is now choosing grace. "You've been different this week." "Different how?" She considered it with the seriousness she brought to important questions. "Lighter," she said. "Like the way you are on the last day before vacation, except it's not vacation." Ryan looked at his daughter, her dark eyes, and her ponytail, and the museum pamphlet on the refrigerator behind her with the blue whale that took up the whole ceiling. 7 years old, and she already knew what he needed before he did. He said. "Can I ask you something?" She looked up. "You remember Lauren from the summer picnic?" Emma nodded slowly. The evaluating squint intensified by approximately 30%. Your boss. Yeah, my boss. He held his daughter's gaze. She's a good person. I want you to know that. Emma ate another spoonful of cereal. She chewed. She swallowed. She set her spoon down with the particular deliberateness of a person who is thinking very hard and does not want to rush what they're going to say. Are you friends with her? Emma said. Like actual friends, not just work. Ryan thought about the lobby. He thought about the car outside the Aldridge. He thought about Lauren looking up sharks on a Saturday afternoon so she would be ready when a 7-year-old tested her. Yes, he said. We're becoming actual friends. Emma nodded once, picked up her spoon again. She can come to dinner sometime, she said with the finality of a verdict. But she should know that I get to pick the movie. I'll let her know. And no sad movies. Emma pointed her spoon. Only good movies. Understood. Okay. She ate her cereal. The subject apparently was concluded to her satisfaction. Ryan sat with his coffee and thought about how love, the careful, patient, real kind, had a way of not announcing itself until you were finally quiet enough to hear it. He had been very loud inside his own head for a long time. The noise of managing and protecting and making sure everything held together. Good noise. Necessary noise. But noise. He was starting to hear what was underneath it. He texted Lauren from the car after drop-off, sitting in the school parking lot with the engine running. Emma says you can come to dinner sometime. She picks the movie. No sad movies. He watched the 3 dots appear. Tell her I said deal. What does she consider a good movie? Anything with animals or a happy ending. Preferably both. I can work with that. A pause. Ryan. Yeah. Thank you. For doing all of this the right way. I know it's a lot. He sat with that for a moment in the car with the school behind him and the whole week ahead, and everything changed and nothing broken. It's worth doing, right? He typed. Yes, she wrote back. It is. He put the phone in his pocket and drove toward the office, toward the day, toward the careful and deliberate thing they were building, the two of them together, one honest conversation at a time. The dinner happened on a Sunday. Not a formal dinner, not something planned with the precision that Lauren usually applied to calendar events. It was Ryan's kitchen, Emma's rules, and a pot of pasta that had been boiling for approximately 2 minutes longer than it should have, because Emma had interrupted the cooking process 3 times once, to show Lauren the blue whale pamphlet once, to demonstrate the correct way to fold a napkin, according to a YouTube video she had watched twice, and considered authoritative, and once simply because she had thought of something else to say, and the something else could not wait. Lauren stood at the kitchen counter and took it all in, with the kind of focused attention she usually reserved for quarterly projections, and Ryan watched her from across the kitchen and thought, she is not performing this. She is actually here. The skeleton, Emma was saying, holding the pamphlet at Lauren's eye level, went from that wall to basically that wall. The whole ceiling. And Marcus said it was bigger than most dinosaurs, and I said, what about the T? Rex, and he said even the T. Rex and I said, Emma? Ryan lifted the pasta off the burner. I'm telling the story. The pasta is done. I'm almost done. She looked back at Lauren. I said even the T. Rex, and he said even the T. Rex. So I looked it up. She set the pamphlet on the counter and crossed her arms with the satisfaction of someone who has arrived at the conclusion of a very important argument. Blue whale. Biggest animal ever. Not just now. Ever. In the history of the earth. Lauren looked at the pamphlet. Then she looked at Emma with an expression that Ryan had never quite seen on her before. Not the professional warmth she used with clients. Not the careful affection she sometimes showed with Sarah. Something more direct than that. Something that meant she was actually paying attention and was actually impressed. Did you know? Lauren said that whale sharks are the biggest fish, not the biggest animal. But the biggest fish. They're not whales at all. Emma's eyes went wide. "I know that," she breathed. "I know that. Dad told me." "Your dad told me," Lauren said. "So now I know too." Emma looked at Ryan, then at Lauren, then back at Ryan with the expression of a child who has just received a piece of information that she is going to need time to process properly. "You told her about the whale shark. We talk sometimes." Emma absorbed this. "About sharks. Among other things." Emma looked at Lauren one more time. The evaluating squint at full intensity, the whole weight of a 7-year-old's judgment brought to bear, and then she said, "Okay, do you want to sit next to me at dinner?" Lauren glanced at Ryan. He lifted a hand. "Your call." "Yeah," Lauren said. "I'd like that." Emma nodded once decisively, the verdict delivered. She climbed into her chair. The matter was settled. They ate pasta and bread, and Lauren had 2 glasses of water because Emma had decided over the course of the meal that she wanted to ask Lauren everything she had ever wondered about running a company which required Lauren's full cognitive presence. The questions were specific and occasionally unanswerable, and Lauren fielded every one of them with genuine seriousness, which Emma recognized and rewarded with her complete trust, which was Ryan knew not a thing Emma gave out lightly. "How do you know if an idea is a good idea?" Emma asked around a forkful of pasta. "You test it," Lauren said. "You make a smaller version of it and see if it works before you build the whole thing." "Like a prototype?" Lauren paused. "Do you know what a prototype is?" "From the Science Museum. They had a thing about inventors." "Then yes, exactly like a prototype." Emma considered this. "What if the prototype doesn't work? Then you learn something. You adjust, you make a better one. And if that one doesn't work, then you learn something again." Lauren's voice was steady. "The point isn't to get it perfect the first time. The point is to not stop trying." Emma ate her pasta thoughtfully. Then, "My dad's like that. He tries stuff a lot. He made pancakes 17 times before he got them right." 17, Lauren repeated. "He counted." Emma looked at Ryan. "You counted right." "I kept a log," Ryan said without shame. Lauren pressed her lips together. "Of course you did." "They're very good pancakes now," Emma said with the loyalty of someone defending an important truth. "The best." "I believe you," Lauren said. Emma seemed satisfied with this. She looked at the pasta on her fork and then back at Lauren, and she said with the casual directness that only children deploy, "Do you like my dad?" The kitchen went very quiet. Ryan set down his fork. Lauren looked at Emma without flinching. She did not look to Ryan for guidance or permission. She looked at the 7-year-old across the table who deserved a real answer, and she said, "Yes, I do. I like him very much." Emma absorbed this, the way she absorbed all significant information, slowly, thoroughly, without rushing to a conclusion. Then she nodded, apparently satisfied, and said, "He's been different lately, lighter. I think it's because of you." Ryan picked up his fork again because it gave his hands something to do. Lauren looked at him across the table. Her expression was careful and open and entirely unguarded, and she said, "I think he's done that himself." Emma looked between them. A small smile crossed her face, quick certain the smile of someone who has been waiting for the grown-ups to catch up and is relieved they finally have. "Can we watch the movie now?" she said. "I picked one. It has penguins." "Penguins," Ryan said. "Happy ending," Emma confirmed. I checked. The movie had penguins and a happy ending, and Emma fell asleep 20 minutes before the credits on the far end of the couch, with her feet tucked under Lauren's knee, which was not something she had planned or asked permission for. She had simply migrated there the way children migrate toward warmth, with the unconscious certainty of someone who has made a decision, her body carried out before her brain caught up. Lauren had gone still when it happened. Ryan had watched her from across the couch, the slight tension in her shoulders, the careful way she didn't move the expression on her face that was not quite wonder, but was close enough to it. Like someone encountering something fragile and not wanting to disturb it. He leaned over and murmured, You okay? She's warm, Lauren said. Barely a whisper. Like it was a thing that had surprised her. I forgot how warm kids are. Ryan looked at his daughter asleep with her mouth slightly open, and her hair escaped from its ponytail, and her hand curled loose on the cushion. Yeah, he said. She runs hot. Always has. Does she do this with... Lauren paused. With people she just met? No, Ryan said. She doesn't. Lauren was quiet for the rest of the movie, and it was not the professional quiet, or the tired quiet, or the thinking quiet. It was something softer than all of those. Ryan sat beside her in the glow of the television with Emma asleep between them, and thought, this is the true version of what I've been protecting. Not the apartment or the job or the careful small life. This Emma asleep and trusting, and a woman beside me who is sitting very still because she doesn't want to disturb her. This was worth protecting. This was also worth opening. He carried Emma to bed at 9:15. She stirred when he laid her down, opened her eyes halfway, and said, Is Lauren still here? She's in the living room. Emma closed her eyes again. Good, she said, and she was asleep before Ryan had finished pulling up the blanket. He stood in the doorway for a moment. The seahorse nightlight turned its slow circles. He thought about the night all of this had started, standing in this same doorway, watching Emma sleep when the phone rang at 11:43, and everything had begun to shift. He thought about how close he'd come to not answering it. He thought about Gerald and Ethereum, and the parking lot outside Lauren's building, and the expression on her face through the car window. He thought nothing about any of this was supposed to happen this way. And also, I wouldn't change a single piece of it. He turned off the hall light and went back to the living room. Lauren was standing by the kitchen counter with her coat in her hand. She had been in the process of leaving politely on schedule, not overstaying, which was the Lauren thing to do. She looked up when he came in. She's down, she said. Out cold. He leaned against the doorframe. She told me she was glad you were still here. Something moved across Lauren's face. She set her coat on the counter. Ryan. She likes you, he said. I want you to know that's not, she doesn't give that out. She's a friendly kid, but she makes her own judgments, and she gave you hers tonight, and it was good. Lauren looked down at the counter. She said, I talk to you like you're a person. I heard about that. At the summer picnic, she came up to me while you were getting food, and she said, Lauren paused, remembering. She said, You're my dad's boss. And I said, yes. And she said, He works really hard. And I said, I know he's the best. And she looked at me very seriously and said, He's the best at home too. Like she needed me to know that. Like she was making sure I understood who he was outside the office. Ryan said nothing. She was protecting you, Lauren said. She was 7 years old at a company picnic, and she was protecting you. She looked up. Her eyes were bright. I thought about that for a long time afterward. I thought about what it means to have someone in your corner like that, unconditionally, no matter what. She paused. I've been building things my whole adult life. Companies, partnerships, strategies. I'm good at it, but I don't... She stopped, steadied herself. I don't have that. I haven't had it in a long time. Someone who is in my corner like that, just because. Ryan pushed off the doorframe and walked to the counter. He stood across from her, close enough to see everything she wasn't hiding. You have Sarah, he said. I know. Sarah is... She almost smiled. Sarah is wonderful, and she will never stop apologizing for Gerald, and I love her for both of those things. The almost smile faded. But that's not what I mean. I know what you mean. She looked at him steadily. I want to be careful, she said. I want to do this right. I've been thinking about that all week, not the HR piece, not the professional piece. I've got all of that managed. I mean the other part, the real part. She put her hand flat on the counter. I don't want to be something that happens to your life, Ryan. I want to be part of it, carefully, slowly. At whatever pace makes sense for Emma, for you, for all of it. I'm not asking for everything at once. I'm just—" She stopped. "I'm asking to stay in the room, that's all. Just let me stay in the room." He looked at her hand on the counter. He put his hand next to hers, not over it, just beside it, close. "You're already in the room," he said. "You've been in the room for 3 years. The difference is now, I'm not pretending I don't see you." Lauren's jaw tightened for a moment with the effort of not reacting, and then she stopped fighting it, and her expression broke open, not dramatically, not with tears or declarations, just with the quiet release of something that had been held a very long time. It was the exhale after the held breath, the surrender of the careful. "I used to walk into the office every morning," she said, "and the first thing I'd do is look over at your desk before I checked my phone, before I looked at the board. You." She said it plainly without apology. "Every morning for 3 years, and then I'd remind myself of all the reasons I couldn't say anything, and I'd go into my office, and I'd do my job." Ryan was quiet. "I got very good at that," she said. The reminding. "I know." He looked at her. "I got good at looking away. We were both idiots. We were both careful. Same thing sometimes." He moved his hand over hers on the counter. She turned hers over and held on, and it was not a grand gesture. It was just two people in a kitchen at 9:30 on a Sunday night, with a child asleep down the hall and pasta dishes in the sink, and the city outside doing what the city always did, indifferent and continuous. It was ordinary in all the ways that the important things always are, the ways that movies never capture, because they happen too quietly to be dramatic. Ryan held her hand and thought, this is what the careful was for. Not to keep this from happening. To make sure that when it happened, it was real. Carol Sims. The board chair called Lauren on Tuesday morning. Lauren took it in her office with the door closed, and Ryan knew from the length of the call, 47 minutes, that it had been a real conversation, not a managed one. Carol was 68, had built 2 companies of her own before joining the board, and was not a woman who could be handled. She could only be met honestly. When Lauren came out, her expression was the one that meant she had spent emotional energy and was now recalibrating. She stopped at Ryan's desk. Carol said, Lauren told him carefully, that she had been wondering for 2 years what was keeping me from being fully happy. Her words. A pause. She said if I had finally figured it out, she was glad, and that the company was not going to fall apart because the CEO has a life. Ryan kept his expression neutral. That's good. She also said, and I want you to know this, she said she respects you. Specifically, she said you have been, her words again, the steadiest person in the building for 3 years, and that if anything this makes the company more stable, not less. She said that. She said that. Lauren held his gaze. You should know that's how you're seen, not just by me. Ryan nodded slowly. He had built his professional life on the premise that being excellent at the thing you're given is what earns the right to be seen. And Carol's words had the weight of that, confirmed from a direction he hadn't been watching. He felt it settle somewhere. It had needed to settle for a long time. Thank you for telling me, he said. Lauren nodded. She started to go back in, then stopped. Ryan. Helen Park stopped me in the elevator this morning. His new secondary reviewer. He looked up. What did she say? She said she wanted me to know she was going to be fair to both of us. Lauren tilted her head slightly. She said, he's been taking care of this company for 3 years. I'm going to make sure this company takes care of him. And then the elevator opened and she left. Ryan said nothing for a moment. Then, I've always liked Helen. Apparently the feeling is mutual. Lauren looked at him, the clear, direct look that had no armor in it. Just Lauren, just herself. You have more people in your corner than you think. I'm starting to see that. Good. She straightened. Now the Reeves account sent another revised draft, and I need you to pull the October version for comparison, because I believe they've changed the liability clause, and I need to confirm before I escalate. Already pulled it. Ryan said. Flag the clause on page 9. They changed the language on the indemnification cap. I put a note in the document. She stared at him for one beat. How did you know I was going to say that? Because you looked at your email when you came in and you made the face. What face? The page 9 face. Lauren gave him a look that he was increasingly certain was her version of adoration expressed through professional restraint. You are an extraordinary person, Ryan Carter. I have my moments. She went into her office. Ryan turned back to his screen. He heard Sarah somewhere down the hall say to someone on the phone, No, the CEO is in a great mood. I have no explanation for it. Do not question it. Adjust and move on. He smiled at his computer screen. He did not try to stop it. 3 weeks later, on a Saturday morning when the October had tipped into November and the air had gone sharp and bright the way it does in the Northeast when the season finally commits, Ryan and Emma and Lauren walked through Riverside Park. It was Emma's idea. She had announced over cereal on Friday morning that she wanted to show Lauren where the ducks were, because there was a spot by the South Pond where the ducks came right up to the path. If you had bread, and Emma had been rationing a bag of bread heels for this exact purpose. Ryan had texted Lauren, who had cleared her Saturday morning with the brisk efficiency of someone who has been waiting to be asked, and that was how they ended up on the path by the South Pond, with Emma between them, the bread bag held at her side with ceremony. The ducks came. Emma distributed bread with the seriousness of someone managing a humanitarian operation. 2 of the ducks were particularly bold, and Emma named them Gerald and Ethereum because Emma had overheard the Gerald story at some point and found it extremely funny and applicable. Gerald wants more, Emma reported. Gerald always wants more, Ryan said. That's Gerald's whole thing. Lauren covered her mouth with her hand and laughed the real laugh, the one that escaped before she could stop it. And Emma looked up at her and grinned because she'd made it happen, and she knew it, and the morning sun was on all 3 of them, and the ducks were there, and the bread was going fast. It was not a perfect moment in the movie sense. Emma got bread on her jacket. One of the non-Gerald ducks was aggressive and required management. Lauren's boots were not appropriate for the muddy path, and she accepted Ryan's offered hand to navigate a particularly unsteady stretch. And when the path leveled out, he didn't let go, and she didn't ask him to. Emma was ahead of them with the bread bag narrating the duck situation as it evolved, fully occupied. Ryan walked with Lauren's hand in his through Riverside Park in November and thought about 11:43 on a Thursday night and a phone ringing in a hallway. He thought about a man named Gerald who had explained cryptocurrency for an hour and 40 minutes. He thought about Seattle and the lobby and the conference room with Diane's 2 pages of clear language. He thought about Carol on the elevator saying the steadiest person in the building. He thought about Helen Park and Marcus and Sarah, who would never stop apologizing for the blind date she had set up, and who had known with the certainty of someone who pays attention long before any of them were ready to say it out loud. He thought about all the years of training himself to look away, and how the careful had not been wasted, it had been preparation. It had been the thing that made this moment possible. The caution and the patience and the doing things right, all of it had been building toward a Saturday in November, with his daughter ahead of them talking to ducks. Emma turned around with the empty bread bag. Gerald ate most of it, she announced. He has no manners. He never has, Ryan said. We should come back next week, Emma said. We could bring more bread. She looked between them, with the evaluating squint, which had softened now, into something more like satisfaction. All 3 of us. Yeah, Ryan said. We can do that. Emma nodded her verdict final. She turned back to the ducks. Lauren squeezed his hand just once without looking at him, and Ryan looked at the path ahead. The November light. Emma's ponytail, the pond, the ordinary morning that was somehow exactly enough. And he thought, this is it. This is the thing. Right here. He had been so focused for so long on holding the life he'd built together, on not dropping it, on making sure nothing broke. And what he hadn't been able to see from inside all that careful holding was that you cannot live inside a clenched fist. You have to open your hands. You have to trust that what matters will stay, not because you're holding it tightly, but because it belongs there. Emma belonged. She had always belonged, and she always would. And Lauren, who had waited 3 years in the quiet, who had protected his life from a distance, when she could have complicated it, who had stood in the lobby and said, "I'm tired of the version of me that knows better," Lauren belonged too. Not in the explosive, reckless way of someone who had crashed through his life. In the way of someone who had been standing at the door patiently and had finally been let in. Ryan Carter had built a careful life. He had done it with intention and love, and the particular stubbornness of a man who refuses to let the people who matter to him feel the ground shake. He had not expected when he answered the phone at 11:43 on a Thursday that the ground was about to shift in a direction he hadn't planned for. He had not expected Lauren Pierce to be the person who changed the shape of everything. But sometimes the thing you've been protecting yourself from is not a threat. Sometimes it's the rest of your life standing outside in the dark, waiting for you to open the door. He had opened it. And everything, the pasta, the penguins, the whale sharks, Gerald the duck, Emma asleep on the couch with her feet tucked in and her hand curled loose, Lauren's hand in his on a November path. Everything that was supposed to hold was holding. Everything worth keeping had stayed.